It's an honor to be here with Jorma Kaukonen, legendary guitarist from Tuna and the Jefferson Airplane. Hello,
Hey
Jorma.
man. Hey, how are you?
Excellent. I'm doing great. Thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time for this interview with Psychedelic Scene magazine.
Awesome. So first of all, let me ask you, where are you physically at this time?
I'm here in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, hey, you're my neighbor to the north. I was up there yesterday with my daughter doing something. I went to get some noodles at Mashiko.
Oh, okay, nice. Nice. Yeah, just a short I don't know what 90 minutes or so. I was hoping I would have the chance at some point to come down to Pomeroy to visit you at Fur Piece, but of course with COVID that it's too soon.
Well, we're not done yet. We got a. I noticed you guys didn't get as much snow as we did. We got a bunch of snow down here.
Yeah, we only got maybe 6 inches. Wasn't
Yeah.
that bad.
It's hard to tell. I'd say 8 to 10.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
So of course, I've got, because we live in the country, I've got a four-wheel drive mule thing with a plow, but I did not put the chains on, which is why it snowed so much. I did put the chains on yesterday, so if it doesn't snow for the rest of the year, you can thank me.
Sure, sure. It's like you only have them when you don't need them, and when you need them, then you don't have them.
How true, how true.
Well, it's been a joy watching you perform over the years. Going back to the Further Fests in '96, '97.
Yeah, right, man.
I really dug your show with Hurl at Natalie's Music Hall, Natalie's
Yeah.
Grandview last week there.
I did too. That's the Hurl and me thing is such an interesting thing. We've been friends for 40 years, but I've always. I mean, if you're hang on. Speaking of Hurl, don't go away. Hey, Hurl.
Yes.
I'm doing a Zoom interview from an illustrious fellow from Columbus. What's up?
Hey, cool, man. Well, I've got you a fresh croissant from the Athens Bread Company.
Awesome. Where are you?
I'm 3 minutes out.
All right. Well, listen. This is we're having a very important conversation about you right now. So
Oh, you talking to Bill?
I am.
Oh, good. Tell him I said hi.
Hurl says hi.
Hi, Hurl.
All right.
Okay,
Listen.
buddy. I'll talk to you a little bit.
Bye.
Bye.
He bought me a croissant. See, that's the kind of guy he is. So anyway, he's a special guy, and there's just something that he brings to the table with his music. And we were sitting around. We've been playing together off and on for years, and our little lunches down here and all that kind of stuff. But when the COVID thing shut us down, and we were still doing a couple of little lunches every now and then, I got, I've loved to play with this guy. Let's do a recording. So I got Justin, the guy that he's the drummer in Hot Tuna, but he's also one of my production guys and stuff. So he brought the studio in a van down here, and I would have put the record out myself, but John, who's the most affable guy in the world, had become really kind of close with the guys at the Culture Factory, and they put the record out for us. Great package, and I think we're thinking about volume 3 because we've got a bunch of new songs now.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, The River Flows. It's just a gorgeous double album of Americana. It's just a beautiful album. I was going
Yeah.
to ask about that and how that all came
Sure.
about. Was that recorded there at Fur Piece?
Yeah, it was recorded. Where the little room you see behind me. I'm in the library here, but the workshop is right across this little courtyard. It was in the workshop, and all our buildings are wood and stuff like that, so the sound is fantastic. And it was a perfect storm for doing stuff like that. And the funny thing is we complain about all the shit that we lost with COVID, and obviously we all wish it didn't happen. But had it not been for COVID, Johnny and I probably wouldn't have gotten a chance to do that.
Hmm, right on. Well, it's interesting how sometimes situations that are negative have a way of bringing something positive ends up coming out of them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's nice to see Hurl getting recognized for his talents too.
Yeah, it's not like Hurl hasn't been doing this all his life too. But he just has never been. I mean, he's been a professional musician also, but he's just never. He's been on the road with me a couple times already now, and it's kind of fun to see him go. So this is what it's like. I'm going. Welcome to my world.
Well, and you guys were so comfortable playing together that show at Natalie's. It was
Totally, absolutely, yeah.
wonderful.
And before we move on, one of the things, and I think I wrote about this on the album, but one of the things that I really loved about getting a chance to, aside from the fact that I love him and his music, is I have no responsibilities except to try to play the best music I can, and that's kind of cool.
You let him handle all the lyrical, all the vocal duties and
Totally.
everything.
Oh, and the other thing that's kind of funny too, is that when you when you get on stage with Hurl, all of a sudden he's like a chatty Cathy. You know, I have to kind of like I have to shut him up if I want to get a word in edgewise. It's really funny. I love it.
That's great. Well, let's see. Before we delve into your prolific career, could you tell us
Sure.
about what you have lined up for your fans in 2022?
Well, we have a lot of gigs coming up. Excuse me. And we're really excited. So, we've got a lot of Hot Tuna stuff coming up. I'm going to be going down um, to meet Jack in Florida in a couple of weeks, and I've got a lot of solo stuff. We're just so thrilled to be able to get back on the road, and since you were at Natalie's, I know you could feel this too, because I've done a couple little tours already. There's an appreciation from both sides of the stage for us performers and the audience, because you kind of do, you're on the road for years, you do what you do, and kind of just take that process for granted. But I don't think any of us take that for granted anymore. So to be able to get out there and actually be in front of a living audience and to do what it is that we love to do so much and to share it with the audience and stuff, it's important stuff. It really is.
Absolutely. It's kind of a carpe diem type of situation where
Oh, totally. Totally. Yeah.
we just don't know, if any show, shows could be canceled due to COVID, or we just don't know what's going to happen. And it seems like that I agree that on both sides, with performers
Totally.
and the audience, have a new appreciation for the fact that this is a special moment that just may never happen again. And we
I agree. I totally agree. And since we're all sort of like native locals and stuff like that, I just can't say too much about Natalie's. I love all those. I love all the folks, and yeah, it's good stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love what Charlie and they were able to do, and the fact that they were able to keep music going safely, when possible. That
Oh yeah, they're not fooling around. They're without getting into this discussion, there's not everybody that takes that safety as seriously as some of us do. And I got to say that Charlie and Natalie, man, they were. I just felt great working for them. I really did.
that was a special night.
Yep. I can hardly wait for the next one. And you get good pizza too.
Yeah,
Ah,
that's right.
the meatballs. The meatball.
Hmm. I haven't tried it. I will have to.
It's the size of the meatball's the size of a baseball, and
Nice.
it's good stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, you won't need more than one. You won't need more than one.
Meatballs as big as your head, right?
Yeah.
Well, I see you're also. I see Hot Tuna is also touring with Little Feat this summer.
Yeah, so we're excited about that too. Obviously all of us, we miss Paul Barrere and the whole deal. He was such a really, really great guy. But the Little Feat thing, it's Little Feat's a state of mind, and I'm really glad that they're continuing and that they've cut us in on this. So when we got the gig to do this with them, Little Feat's such a big band, you know, and even though Electric Hot Tuna is only a trio, what we decided to do is we're going to play acoustic instruments, but standing up. That way we can shuffle in and off. Set changes will be easy. Bring it, so I'll be playing that guitar that you saw me playing at Natalie's the other night, but I'll be plugged in and stuff like that. Jack will play an electric bass, not his acoustic bass, and Justin will play a small set of drums, and that way we can shuffle in and out. And of course, that we'll be cut in for the big jam session and stuff like that. So of course I will be bringing. I may not bring my Marshall with me, but I'll be okay. I'll bring an amp that's loud enough. Trust me on that.
Nice. Yeah, I've noticed that over the years with Hot Tuna, you've gone back and forth, acoustic to electric, back to acoustic, and sometimes in the same night, you're switching back and forth.
Yeah.
What's your motivating factor in deciding the instrumentation? Does the set list decide the instrumentation, or does the instrumentation decide the set list? Or
Honestly, whether we did some stuff in the past where we would split the show up with acoustic and electric, when we were just starting to get back into playing electric again. I find that I'm not particularly fond of that as a show. I like to do either one or the other. And one of the things I think that dictates whether you do one or the other, to be honest with you, is how much you're getting paid. In other words, because otherwise, if we're doing a bus, you got to have a trailer for electric equipment and stuff like that. So there's a lot of factors. Me and Jack and Justin too, we're lucky because we love them both. We love being able to do both of them. There is a certain, there are some songs that I would only do electric because they just tend not to work as well acoustically. Although, interestingly enough, with the pandemic stuff, where we're like dredging stuff out of the wood, from the attics of my mind, a song like "Ode to Billie Dean," so it's a sort of a slow A minor blues song, which I always did electrically. I found out to do it extremely sparsely acoustically actually works too. So yeah, so you never know, but there are some things that really just that need to be more bombastic, and so with an electric show, we can do a lot of these songs that are also done acoustically, but with an acoustic show, there's some of the electric songs don't work so well.
Sure, makes sense. Well, also I see that you finally get to celebrate your 80th birthday with the concert at Carnegie.
Yeah, better late than never. Better late than never.
What do you have planned for the occasion?
Okay, so we're going to be at Carnegie Hall, which is an interesting beast. Carnegie Hall now requires booster shots, which is okay. I've already gotten mine, and I'll get the next one when I need it. And so this offends a lot of people, but oh well, that's how it is. Anyway, yeah. I'm sorry, you almost got me started there.
Feel free.
No, but anyway, so yeah, Carnegie Hall. So what we're going to do is among other things, we're going to reprise Burgers, the album Burgers, in its entirety.
Oh, nice.
And, of course, Papa John, may he rest in peace, is no longer with us, but I know Larry Campbell. And so Larry will be playing all the Papa John songs on the violin or the fiddle. You know the difference between a violin and a fiddle?
The bow? No.
A violin has never had beer spilled on it. Anyway, yeah, so right, barroom jokes. Yeah, so Larry will be doing all that kind of stuff. Now we've got his lovely wife Teresa on board also. So I'm gonna hopefully I'm gonna get a chance to do some rehearsing with Teresa, because I've written a couple of new songs that I could hear her voice on harmony. So, but we are in its entirety unbroken. We're gonna do the Burgers thing as it is on the record. And then hopefully we got a bunch of other stuff too. Now Carnegie Hall is one of these. Is unlike the Beacon. They're not elastic about playing overtime. So whatever they have allotted us time, I'm going to be scripting things carefully because it's really expensive if you go over. It's New York.
Wow, well that sounds like a lot of fun. That they get to recreate your Burgers album in entirety. Yikes! That sounds
yikes indeed.
Wow. Well, yeah, you were talking a little bit about Jack, and yeah, looking back through your career, one constant it seems like has been your lifelong bandmate Jack.
Absolutely, totally. Yeah.
Could you tell us about your 60-year bond with Jack?
Yeah, so sure. So, it's just one of those things. You just never know. I met the Casady family in '56. My dad was in the service, so we came back from overseas. I met the Casady family. I started up being friends with Jack's older brother, and he actually turned me on to Chicago blues. So the Casady family is extremely, and Jack's mom used to make me sandwiches all the time. So she was like my second mom in a lot of ways. But anyway, so Jack and I, we've just been buddies forever, and we started playing music together. It's funny, people talk about like my teenage daughter, she sometimes talks about a career and stuff like that. I didn't even know what the word career meant when I was that age, but I always loved playing the guitar. And so Jack and I, we just gravitated together because we both played instruments, and kind of one thing, none of this was ever planned. One thing led to another. And one of the things that both of us find so interesting is that in all the years, we don't, we're really, if we had Jack in this interview together, you'd get all kinds of different opinions from him because we're really different guys. But we disagree about a lot of stuff, but we've never had an argument. We've never had a band meeting. The Airplane, as much as I enjoyed playing with those folks, the band meetings were loathsome, loathsome. And anybody who's been in a big rock and roll band will know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, and we've just always gotten along, and we bring different things to the table. We're not afraid to try stuff. If it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, hey, nobody died, and we're still just buddies. I mean, you wonder why? The answer is I don't know. But we are.
Wow. Wow. Well, he's just such a fantastic bassist. One of the best and baddest rock bassists of all time.
I agree.
I didn't realize that it was his brother Chick that taught you the blues.
Oh yeah. So I mean, Chick. Again, it's an interesting story. Chick was like, remember Maynard's Krebs in the Dobie Gillis show? Maynard Krebs is the beatnik guy. Look at it, Google it when you're done. So and Bob Denver, I think, was the Maynard Krebs character.
Oh. Okay.
In any case, so Chick was a little bit older than me. So when he was getting out of high school, he grew this little goatee, which back in those days it was like, I mean, look, you just can't imagine what notice. Nobody would know. You call that a beard? People went crazy when Chick grew that beard, So he was kind of like a beatnik kind of guy, and along with that went folk music and this and that. I remember he had a banjo, but he never learned to play it. He just made irritating noises on it. But he had a huge and really interesting record collection, and so we just spent a lot of times listening to stuff. So I got turned on to stuff that, to be honest with you, I may never have heard it like that before. I mean, all those classic chess recordings and. And a lot of, he turned me on to Sidney Bechet, a lot of the New Orleans guys and stuff like that, because that's what he did. So I owe him a debt of gratitude to turn me on to the music and sharing his little brother with me.
Right. And then he moved off to college, so that Jack was still there, so you got to start the trials with Jack.
Well, actually, Chick joined the Army. That's a story too. So back in those days, I'm trying to think. I guess he probably joined the Army. He graduated in '58. And I think they joined the Army in '59. Dangerous time to be in the Army because of Vietnam coming. However, he and this other guy, one of our other guys that was of his class, this guy Hugh Frost, they joined the Army on the buddy system. They were supposed to go to the same place. Chick went to somewhere in the Carolinas, and they sent Hugh to Alaska, some buddy system. But neither of them went to Vietnam, so that's a good thing.
Oh, that's good. So you started the Triumphs with Jack back in high school, and then you moved to from DC to Yellow Springs, right here in Ohio, for college.
Correct.
And then you moved to San Fran in 1962, and I mean, it seems like you were way ahead of the curve moving to San Fran before it became a musical mecca. What prompted your early move to San Fran?
Well, one of the things. I'm one of these guys that wound up graduating college kind of in spite of themselves. And I think two things kind of kept me in school. One, my parents expected it of me, and there was that back in that era. But the other thing was everybody was getting drafted and sent to Vietnam. And if you stayed in school, you got a 2S deferment, So that was kind of like an important thing to have before I realized that you can actually be unfit for service. But that's another story. So I got accepted. My dad, again, we're stationed in the Philippines. I went to this Jesuit school there after Antioch for a year, and I got all these weird, Thomistic, all the Jesuit philosophy, all this kind of shit that nothing but another Jesuit school would take. And one of the guys one of my teachers there had gone to San Francisco University, which is a Jesuit school in San Francisco. Now, I've been reading Kerouac and all this stuff. San Francisco just looked like a cool place to go. But my grades weren't good enough to get into the University of San Francisco. But I did get into Santa Clara, down the peninsula, another Jesuit school. My dad complained about $1,500 a semester back then. I think it's $80,000 now, but that's a whole other story. So anyway, so I wound up in Santa Clara, and that the whole scene that you alluded to, none of that had happened yet.
Right.
But the Bay Area has always been a cool place. One of the things, before I continue, one of the reasons that we all moved to San Francisco, because I lived down the peninsula, San Francisco was a cheap place to live back then, which of course we know is not the case at all today. But anyway, so I moved to California, and I remember coming from the East Coast, I had this sort of like East Coast elitism kind of stuff. I figured, because I'd spent some time in New York, I'll go to the Bay Area and I'll show these yokels what real folk music and blues is like. And of course, needless to say, that was utter nonsense because the whole Bay Area was populated by incredibly talented people. I mean, Jerry Garcia was one of the luminaries when I moved there, but there were so many. Most of them have passed away now, but the Bay Area scene was an unbelievable scene for music in general, but especially acoustic music, blues, folk music, bluegrass, all that kind of stuff. And there were literally dozens of really, really good people. So all of a sudden, I'm surrounded in an incredibly, for the most part, nurturing environment of being this idiot kid from the DC area, and all of a sudden, I'm realizing, wow. And I just learned so much for all these people, and they pretty much welcomed me, into the scene as soon as I got there.
Nice. You went out there kind of expecting to be somewhat of a teacher, and instead you became a student. And,
boy, you can say that again.
So, wow, what an amazing time that must have been, just performing around the Haight with
Sure.
alongside Marty and Paul and Jerry,
Sure.
and Pigpen and Janice and Crosby.
So the whole music scene back then, when I got there in '62, pretty much, none of us had cars, so the scenes were sort of insulated. So my friend Tom Hobson, he was a San Francisco guy, and there's a lot of other guys. Jerry was a Palo Alto guy. My friend Steve Talbot and Bill Bond, some of these other guys that nobody's ever heard of, were from Berkeley, et cetera, et cetera. So when you went, I mean, it was almost like going to another state if you went to San Francisco. Later on, of course, when everybody got cars and stuff, we drove around a bit more. But the thing was that the scenes were very interesting. The San Jose folk music scene sort of evolved as an island unto itself. Cantor was a huge, was one of the prime movers of that. A bunch of other people that are no longer with us. Jerry certainly was one of the lead movers in the Palo Alto area. But my mind is I'm having a huge brain fart here. New Riders of the Purple Sage. Dave, help me here.
Marmaduke.
Dawson. Pardon?
David Nelson?
Yes, Dave Nelson. Yeah, he was one of those guys back then too. I mean, he was a heavyweight before we really knew what a heavyweight was. Anyway, but the scene was unbelievable, really. And there were lots of places to play, not a lot of places to make money playing. Actually, that's why so many of us took to teaching, because you could make money doing that. But there were lots of bars and coffee houses, and actually we wound up getting to play all the time, which was really cool.
Nice. So you weren't driving cars. Were you going around on your motorcycle? Was it getting to gigs?
Well, back and then, I remember I had this thing called a Harley Davidson made a forgettable scooter called a Topper that somebody gave me, but I didn't have any license plates for it, and it wasn't or a title, so I could drive it around the area and not worry about getting stopped. But you couldn't go anywhere. No, we took the Greyhound.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we took the bus.
Nice. Well, it's some classic blues songwriting materials there.
Totally.
So you formed Jefferson Airplane with Marty and Paul in '65,
Sure.
And
Right.
seems like suddenly the music started to get pretty psychedelic when LSD entered the equation.
Sure. I mean, so many really interesting things happened back then. I mean, you couldn't, if you're, before it happened, if you were going to write a movie about the future, you could never come up with this shit in a million years. So you got to remember that LSD was legal back in those days. Pot, on the other hand, and again, it's been a while since I've gotten high. That's another story unto itself. But I've smoked a lot of pot. That pot, even back then, we knew that stuff was incredible shit. You could go to jail for 20 years for smoking that shit, and it was shit. Seeds, stems, the whole 9 yards. But LSD was legal. Interesting stuff. So all of a sudden, for whatever reason, San Francisco's always been a sort of an interesting magnet for oddballs and stuff like that. I mean, it wasn't just the beats. I mean, it's always been weird stuff going on.
Mhm.
So there, but when Marty Cantor moved up to San Francisco because they had a more active quote unquote commercial folk scene, which he was interested in, and he met Marty and Signe, our first girl singer, and stuff like that, and so all of a sudden some stuff was starting to happen, and you wonder why was it happening, and the answer is who knows. I'm sure acid had a lot to do with it. I don't think there's any question about it. But one of the other things was also, and it's hard to think about this when you think about how ridiculously, excuse me, expensive San Francisco is today. San Francisco is a small town. It physically can't get any bigger than, I mean, it grows up now, but back then, I think the tallest building in San Francisco in '65, that was way before the Transamerican Pyramid. I think it was like an 8-story building because they couldn't build tall buildings because of the earthquake stuff. It's mostly, it was a low-rise town, little apartments, Victorian apartments, stuff like that. But there was a community of artists of all sorts, not just musicians, and everybody kind of worked together. I mean, this many years after the fact, this was before hippies too, before that word even existed, but what did all that mean? And the answer is, who knows? I mean, who knows really? But I remember like a band like the Charlatans, well worth looking into. And if you haven't seen their documentary Rockin' at the Red Dog, you got to check that out sometime. Because they were actually one of the first San Francisco bands to be a band and to get visibility before the Airplane. But anyway, but there were, people owned stores and this and that. It's a very productive artistic community in a lot of ways. So it was just waiting for this to happen. The fact that the music grew and expanded beyond the regions of the Bay Area, who knows? It was a miracle. Again, I have no doubt that the drug culture had a lot to do with it.
Sure. But yeah, it was like this, it seems like it was like this new renaissance. I mean, it seems how amazing it must have been to be a part of that kind of unprecedented explosion of creativity.
I mean, if you think about a guy my age, my metaphor for this is until 1964, 65, the world was monochromatic. After that, it was in Technicolor.
Sure. Well, and you were in your 20s, like all of you were in your 20s, and then suddenly like you're composing these songs that just became the soundtrack of the late 60s. And I mean, songs that are like etched into the fabric of our lives. How did it feel to be changing the world at such a young age? Or when did you realize that you were making an impact?
I don't think any of us well, certainly not myself, didn't realize it at the time. But interestingly enough, before we started the Zoom thing today, I was pottering around for some reason or other. I grabbed my phone and I went to volunteers and I listened to "We Can Be Together." This is not a light piece of pop fluff. It really isn't. And there's like 7 different musical parts to this song. I mean, who could even think about stuff like that, really? We were just in the flow of so much stuff going on. And, I wasn't really writing songs back in those days, except for Embryonic Journey. That doesn't have lyrics. But think of the writers, Paul, Marty, Grace later on, and a lot of other local people. All of a sudden, the San Francisco gang was writing their own stuff. And nobody gave a shit whether it was commercial or not, The Airplane is such an interesting beast. Everybody's trying to find out ways. How can we somehow, because we have a legacy company that manages the Airplane stuff, and they're always trying to figure out how can we do with the Airplane what's happened to Hendrix and the Doors. And I keep telling the guys to do it. Listen, man, I think the Airplane legacy deserves to live. I think it for a lot of reasons, and not just because we had 2 hits. It was a very interesting band. But for that reason, it's very hard to put your finger on what the deal was. People go, how about a movie about Jefferson Airplane? I go, come on, I could see an anime thing about it. I just don't see it. I don't know. Hard to say. But anyway, all these really talented people, that had no boundaries about what was happening in the commercial world. The fact that we lucked in with 2 hits, which Grace brought from Grace Society, by the way, all of a sudden gave us a bunch of power in an extremely establishment record company. And from that moment on, we did exactly what we wanted to do and never gave a shit about what they wanted us to do. I mean, they wanted us to do shit that they wanted us to wear uniforms. They wanted us to do this, that, and we just basically said, fuck you. We're not doing that. This is what we're going to do. And we weren't the only band that did that. I mean, the Grateful Dead certainly marched to their own drummer. Big Brother, same thing.
Must have been nice to have that freedom and not be
lucky
tethered to the what the record company wanted you to do.
Totally. I mean, think about this also. I mean, I can't say too many times how lucky I am. Jefferson Airplane. Here's a band that got together. Our first gig was on Friday the 13th, August 1965. And by 1966, we had a record deal with a major company. I mean, how often does that happen? The answer is never.
That's a meteoric rise there.
Somebody was looking out for us.
And then in just a couple of years, you were performing at some of the most legendary concerts of all time. I mean, could you tell us maybe just a few words about some of them, like Monterey Pop and?
Sure. So Monterey Pop, that was such an interesting beast because there'd been folk festivals. I played the hoot at two of the Monterey folk festivals, and there'd been jazz festivals, but nobody really had a rock and roll. I mean, Monterey Pop was really a rock and roll festival. But one of the most interesting ones, I mean, look at the lineup of people: Ravi Shankar, Otis Redding, us, just all kinds of stuff, So that was the first one. What an interesting animal. And also, if for some reason you're ever in California, you're driving around, have nothing to do, go to the Monterey, county, the Monterey fairgrounds. It's tiny. I have no idea how many people were at Monterey Pop, but compared to the big ones later on, it was not 20,000 people, maybe, who knows, Huh. But that was a big deal. All of a sudden, we're getting some kind of respect in an art form that we consider as an art form, but nobody's really taking rock and roll seriously. And then they did the movie, which all of a sudden we're in a movie. And then people started having festivals, and then the big three, Monterey, Woodstock, and Altamont, of course. But there were lots of other big festivals too. I mean, I remember we did right before Altamont, we did the West Palm Beach Pop Festival with the Stones, and before Woodstock, we did the Atlantic City one. Janis was on that show. So there's all of a sudden there's just stuff going on, and and also, I don't think it really emphasized this much. Being young has a lot to do with that also. It really does, because that's just the deal. I mean, like my daughter. My daughter went to some summer camp in upstate New York, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And of course, we drove by Woodstock, and I took her to the museum, and she looks at these pictures. She goes, she's horrified. Did you really go out dressed like that? I'm going, everybody dressed like that. This, stage clothes. That was just the deal,
Yeah, right. There's a style at the time.
Yep. Well, but anyhow, yeah, interesting stuff. So all of a sudden, you come from, because San Francisco was a moderately small city back in those days, and all of a sudden you have a voice, an international voice. I mean, you can't script stuff like that. Looking back on it, it's like a guy like me recognizes the miracle of what's happening. At the time, I think that when you're in the flow of all that and you're young, you almost just take it as it's your due. You deserve that, And you can enjoy that as long as you want to, but all of a sudden you realize, no, you didn't deserve it. You got lucky.
So to an extent, do you feel like you were in the right place at the right time there in San Fran?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't have been in a better place.
Well, it still seems like you kind of knew which way the wind was blowing, though. You were ahead of the curve. You got out there early.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. I mean, just thinking about it, because both of us live in Ohio. Think about an Ohio band like Glass Harp. A truly, truly great band. Had it not been for Cream, Glass Harp could have been them. Had they been in San Francisco, everybody would know about Glass Harp. I mean, it's just. It's just the luck of the draw, really.
Right, and yet, and is it Phil Keaggy?
Phil Keaggy, yeah, he lives in Nashville.
Who
I think.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just
not as recognizable of a name.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about Sfaro. I think is I should know all these guys too. One of the guys, I think the drummer's son played for Tedeschi Trucks for a while. I don't know. Great bunch of music. I mean, really stellar bunch of musicians, all of them. You know. Yeah, Phil lives in Nashville. The other guys still live up in Cleveland.
That's a good example of how you could have all the talent in the world, but if you're not necessarily in a place where you're going to get recognized, then it doesn't necessarily translate.
Yeah. You know, that being said, there's a lot of ways to be successful in life, and you know, just because you're not a figure on the world stage doesn't mean you're a failure by any stretch of the imagination. But I mean, all of a sudden, if that happens to you, you got to recognize that, man, did I step in shit this time?
Well, you'd mentioned Altamont when you were talking about the big three. You mentioned
Sure.
Altamont, and I'm curious, what was it like to have like such a high point in your career contrasted by that dark moment, and which seems like really affected
Right.
the airplane.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so much second guessing about that after the fact, and I'm sure this many years later, nobody needs another opinion. But I mean, look, this many years later, the whole thing was ill thought out. Well, yeah, you know, and I was some recent pictures have just popped up, and I'm looking at it, I go, it's just hard to imagine that this was allowed to happen, but it did, because a lot of things were allowed to happen back in those days. I think there's no question. I mean, Monterey was extremely well run. I mean, all those LA guys that put it together, they just did a great job, and it was small, but it was doable. Woodstock, Mike Lang just passed away recently. May he rest in peace. But anyway, at Woodstock, it could have been worse. I mean, I'm sure everybody didn't have a great time there, but in retrospect, it's like one of these iconic festivals. Although, somebody was going, well, what did you think of Woodstock? And I go, well, look, just like I told my daughter, I'll never play in front of 500,000 people again as long as I live. That's just the deal, And if you had a good time at Woodstock, it was a great deal. But in that era of festivals, like backstage, there were like zero amenities. All this business about catering. Catering, what's that? I'll settle for a porta potty.
There were no riders back then, right?
No, none of that stuff existed. That was all in the future.
Well, while we still have time, I wanted to get to Fur Piece Ranch. So you've been a guitar teacher for over 50 years from the early
Sure.
days in San Francisco,
Yeah.
and now your own guitar school at Fur Piece you've had for the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about what Fur Piece has to offer?
Sure. So I looked into this piece of property in '89, which is really why I moved to Ohio, and I've been here ever since, and I'm not going anywhere. So we have this 100 or some acre. I live in Southeast Ohio. It's really pretty down here, et cetera, et cetera. And so we wound up opening in '98, and we have the whole thing was I'd always loved to teach, and had it not been for my wife Vanessa, none of this would have gotten done. Vanessa gets things done. I'm a guitar player. If it had been up to me, I would have been out by the campfire with my guitar and a bale of hay. But anyhow, so we have all these buildings and quite a lot of infrastructure and stuff like that. And so over the last almost 2.5 decades, we've really just been trying to make the learning experience as unintimidating as possible, and to make, because to me, the music is an interesting beast, but it doesn't have to be mystifying or complex. Some music is very hard to play. I personally don't happen to think the kind of music that I play is hard to play. It takes time to learn how to do it, but I mean, you don't need to, live with some monk in Tibet for half your life in order to grok what's going on, But anyhow, so over the last couple of decades, we've been doing. We're sort of a seasonal thing here. We've been doing this camp now. COVID has changed everything. We tried to do some in-person stuff during the pandemic, and we were lucky. My wife, we were sanitizing stuff. We got the blue lights in the ceiling. We got all that stuff. It just, nobody was comfortable. It just wasn't really working out. So So right now I'm doing most of the stuff I'm doing is online. This year we only actually have two in-person things. It's a work in progress. We're gonna have to see what's going on. But you alluded to this, and I can't. I agree completely. I love to teach. I always have. But my students go, "Man, you're so patient." I'm really not patient. I'm not a patient guy. But I don't find it frustrating, say, teaching the same thing over and over again. I mean, it's just I'm a slow learner. Being able to demystify that process, I just really love it. I really do, and I don't. It doesn't require patience on my part. We've been lucky. We have so many great teachers that have been coming through our doors since we've been open, and hopefully this will continue. Like I said, it's thanks to the pandemic, or it's a work in progress. We'll see what's going to happen.
Well, it's nice that you're able to keep the lessons going virtually online.
Yeah. Oh,
And
absolutely.
that's really important for young guitarists who
Sure.
want to be able to learn from you. And and Fur Peace also doubles as a concert venue as well.
Correct.
And
That's one of the things we're going to be doing this year. We're doing. We are not. We're doing lots of concerts. We're doing a lot of concerts, and you can go to our website, furpeaceranch.com, FURPEACE, because it's a fur piece from anywhere. Furpeaceranch.com, and we're doing lots of shows. And we've been over the quarantine. We're doing those free quarantine shows. We just did one last week, me and Earl. We're going to do more of those again, I think. And we're just trying to keep our connection alive with the people. And like we mentioned earlier in this interview, I've got a lot of gigs coming up this year too. So far so good.
nice. Well, yeah, those quarantine sessions, those have been a huge hit with your fans on social media, your Facebook page. Man, what an incredibly supportive group of fans you have.
Yeah, of course they are free. One of the things we loved about that is like, when we were doing the shows, one of the things we do, it's not really a concert. It's like a variety show. And Vanessa and I bullshit about stuff and this and that, and everybody wants to hear us. But when they complain, I go, well, you can ask for your money back. Oh, wait a minute. It's free. We have a good time with it. We have a good time with it.
Nice. Fantastic. Um, well, let's see. I wanted to mention that I was reading your autobiography, Been So Long, and wow, it has some really fascinating stories about your travels around the world.
Sure.
Your ancestral lands in Finland, the pyramids
Sure.
in Egypt and Greece and Pakistan. What's your favorite destination, or what's the most interesting place that you ever traveled or
Wow.
performed?
That's interesting. That's a really good question. I kind of, and I don't have a really good answer for it. I wish I could just hone in on one thing, but I like traveling. Because my dad was in the service. I've traveled all my life. One of the things that happened, and just as a little sidebar here, I've never been around my family this long in all the years I've been married, or my kids. They're not, so it's kind of interesting to actually spend this much time at home because I'm just used to being out and traveling. So, gosh, that's a good one. Um, wow. I think one of the things that just comes to mind now is that, over the years I've been able to tour in Italy a lot. I really like Italy, not just because of the food. I love that, obviously, but Italy is such a music loving culture in general. So I remember, it's got to be 15 years ago now, but we were somewhere on the west coast of Italy. This is the concert back when the Italian government sponsored lots of shows and stuff like that for people. Nobody's got any money now, but so we did this show somewhere. I can't remember the name of the town, but it was like this Roman ruin on top of a mountain on the west coast of Italy. I mean, what's not to like, And I remember in order to get there, um, they had to drag us up in these like little carts and stuff like that. And you get up to the top, and there's this Roman ruin. They had a sound system, and they did a show, and it was a full moon that night.
Mm.
That's one of those things that just like just visually and the mood of the people, because the Italians are a great audience, and just being on top of that mountain on that, who knows how many thousands of years old that Roman ruin was, and a full moon and the ocean.
Wow, that sounds
It's a good gig. It's a good
yeah,
gig.
that sounds incredibly picturesque.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Um, well, Wow, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down for this interview, and I think that I think that's just about all the questions that I had in mind. I was afraid that we were going to run out of time, and I'm glad that to have mostly gotten through all of it.
Well, I'm glad everything worked out fine. We're always glad when things worked out fine. Well, you know where to find me. I'm about, about 90 miles away.
That's
And
right.
if I don't see you down here, I'll probably see you up at Natalie's again because I love that place.
I hope so. I hope so. And who knows? Maybe one of these days, yeah, I would love to get down to attend a concert or even a class sometime down at for a piece.
Absolutely. Well, you know who to get a hold of.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
Thank you
cool, man.
thank you so much, Jorma. I really appreciate your time and for this taking the time for this interview with Psychedelic Scene magazine. And
Awesome.
um, have a wonderful 2022 and a belated happy 80th birthday that you get to finally celebrate. Even like
Yeah,
81.
better late than never.
That's right.
Well, cool, man. Well, listen, have a great day, and we'll be talking sometime again, I'm sure.
Thank you. That would be great, Jorma. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man.
Live long and prosper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well done. I'm out of here.